Teachers of Reddit, what is the scariest thing you have ever seen a student do? Answering this as a school bus driver. First day of school, a student grabs a girl that was getting off the bus from behind and pretends to cut her throat with his finger. Whoa Nelly, instant front seat, instant right up. Principal says boys will be boys, ignore it. Third day of school, same student gets up while we're doing 55 miles per hour and finger guns several students in the back of the head, execution style. Mother of God, big right up. Principal, boys will be boys, you can't put him in the front seat for that, it was playful. No, the absolute heck it was not playful. He did the same thing the next day, but this time I had the principal time stamped on my camera telling me I wasn't allowed to put him in the front seat, and him doing it again. I wrote up the kid, and the mother effing principal. Instant poop show, pulled into safety office at work with the transportation director, warned I could lose my job if I escalate this poop, but I didn't back down. I wanted the kid off the bus, but if I couldn't have that, I needed him in the front seat away from everyone else. I got it, the principal was banned from coming within 50 feet of my bus. She couldn't stop herself, and did so after 2 weeks to tell me I was an awful person. She was immediately removed from her position because I wrote her up again. Anyway, new principal rides the bus, tells me he's got the kid now, and the kid's so scary that they have to have him in his own class, with 2 adults, but that the mom refuses to get the kid any help or admit there's a problem. I'm told not to allow anyone within 3 seats of him. And one day, the kid says, bus driver, do you think people are colorful on the inside, like robots, or all boring and the same color like my dogs? I followed up. He casually tells me he's killed his dogs, and put their parts on the fence 4 times. His sister rides a different route, had told me when he was 3 or 4, he sat on the cat and killed it on purpose. That she had to sleep with her door locked because he'd tried to kill her in her sleep multiple times. She moved out the day she turned 16, and in that state, no one could make her return home. And he said, on the day that he confessed to killing his dogs, don't worry bus driver, mom's going to get me a new puppy. Sure as poop, dropped him off at daycare, and mom was there to surprise him with a new puppy. At 15 he killed his mom, his aunt, his 2 little cousins, and all of their dogs, and went to school covered in their blood, not believing he'd done anything wrong. He'd killed them because he wanted to go to a friend's house, and she said no. This was a boy who was about 5. I would help my mom, who was the actual teacher. This kid would constantly cry. All the time, no matter what we did. I would always sit with him and color, talk, just anything to try to help him feel better. He would always make sad pictures of himself crying in a monster. He said no one believed the monster was bad. I told him we all have monsters sometimes, but we have to be brave because once we face the monster, sometimes they go away. I ended up telling his mom about this monster, and she wasn't sure what it could be. Long story short, the monster ended up being his dad. He cried all the time because the dad was inappropriately abusing him. I hate saying it any other way. Every day he was home. But the mom actually walked in on it when she got off early from work one day. She tried to shoot the dad, he ended up in jail. She told me she put the kid in therapy. I've not seen him since, but that has stuck with me. I thought it was just a creepy thing he thought about. The monster. Make-believe or something. But no, his monster was real. I had a student who became obsessed with my colleague. The student was unstable and had threatened to delete multiple times. He started to believe he was in a relationship with this other teacher, and it was the only reason to live. He'd corner the teacher a lot, trying to get them to be alone. He told other students they were in a relationship. He even sat outside the teacher's apartment after following him home once. When I heard and saw how his crush was escalating, I talked to the teacher and reported my concerns to admin. The other teacher was afraid he would lose his job because we are in the South and he's gay, and so he didn't know how to handle the situation but was very uncomfortable. He was right, the student totally flipped out when admin and guidance confronted him. He assured them it was a real relationship, and started trying to corner other staff to find out who told. He was escorted off campus by police multiple times. The teacher was put on leave and just quit and moved to another state, after which someone told the student I'd been the one to report to admin. He started following me, trying to find out where the teacher moved, interrupted my classes over and over even though I didn't teach him, wanted to know what the teacher's new address was, and threatening me. I had to be escorted to my car at the end of the day several times. We were all afraid of the student. He once stood outside the school for hours in front of the flagpole crying. I was sure the kid was going to hurt himself or someone else. I begged everyone to get the kid help. His mom didn't believe any of it was true and refused all help that was offered, like counseling and a psych eval. She told the school that if they called her again making up stories about her son, she'd sue. It was a mess. I was a teacher for 15 years. This happened to my girlfriend at her school. Grade 2 teacher hears sounds in the back coat closet. She finds a boy and girl from her class, 6 or 7 years old, in a naughty position. When the boy hops off, he is not up. They were just pretending. Call both sets of parents in. Turns out they all get together on Sat nights and have prom nights. They watch it with the kids in the room. So, these two kids were just mimicking what they saw. Child's aid was called, and my guess is that night got cancelled. Not evil scary, just scary. My dad was the elementary school principal, and there was a little girl in one of the younger grades who would fall asleep during class and wouldn't wake up no matter what her teacher or my dad or the paramedics my dad called would do. She'd eventually wake up on her own after several hours. She did this randomly, scaring her teacher, my dad, and her parents a lot. Sadly, eventually, she died in her sleep at home. I had a student last year who would get upset and stand against a wall banging his head until blood started to smear the wall. Yes, we tried to stop him, but it usually involved 3 to 4 adults restraining him. Kids can be hard to restrain when they're thrashing around. It never surprises me to hear of kids my students' ages being put in handcuffs. His mom said the wall banger was fine and didn't need any counseling. My principal encouraged me to work harder at building a relationship with him. The kid would usually be returned to class within 30 minutes of being dragged out with a bandage on his head and a bag of hot Cheetos. My mom is a teacher. She once told me about the student who spent the entire class furiously writing Bible verses all throughout their notebook. The students always wore black long capes to school and said they identified as werewolves. My mom had to call the student's parents one day because the student was writing threatening things on the notebook and drawing very scary pictures. Somewhere in that conversation, my mom learned that the student's dad identified as a ghost and the mom identified as a vampire, and they were angry at my mom for trying to stop the student from expelling their feelings in the notebook. They told my mom that she needs to be very careful because they know witches who would come after her from afar. Nothing happened to my mom, but it freaked her out for a very long time. Literally, it was a riot. Remember that year when people were calling in bomb threats to schools all over the country? The high school I taught at was one of them, so at least once a week, we had to evacuate the building and go to the elementary school behind us, and we sat in the gym. Well, one of these times, 2 rival gangs in the school started a fight. One student revealed he had a taser and all chaos broke out in that elementary school. We had to get the police officers from not only our own city but 2 neighboring cities to come and get it under control. Our principal got a black eye, and the assistant got a concussion. Several police officers were beat up, too. I used to pick my younger sister up from her school. She was in year 3 back then. That day I came in a bit early and found the students creating chaos and screaming. There was no teacher there. My sister and other students were crying and running out of the classroom. I decided to investigate the matter, and what I saw shocked me to the core. There was this little girl with a blade in her hand and pointing it at her other arm, threatening others that she would cut herself. Also, the fact that she was laughing the whole time made it much scarier. It was an actual sharp blade. I escorted the students to leave the class and screamed for the teacher. A little 7-year-old with behavioral problems that I had passed on concerns about several times, threw his slate chalkboard across the room, and luckily just the flat of it smacked a little girl in the face. The next class he punched me in the balls and I sat down for 10 minutes, calmly collected my things and walked out. My sister is a teacher, and a student wrote her a note about how nice her feet were and how much he wanted to touch them. This kid was 8. Not sure if this qualifies, but I was working at an elementary school. And my coworker was asking this 3rd grader to try a more advanced reading assignment, because the student was performing well. The girl refused and wanted to stay at the same level as her friends. My coworker just asked if she wanted to at least try the assignment. And then with full Karen conviction the girl uttered the words, "Let me talk to your boss." I used to be a school social worker and I am male. One time I did an intervention with a couple of middle schoolers, probably my 2nd year on the job, so I was 26 years old. It was conflict resolution, and I was facilitating it with one of the counselors. This young lady whose conversation didn't go the way she wanted it to. It ended up coming to a nice resolution between the two students. I guess she told her parents, or someone, that I inappropriately touched her. Thank God my facilitator as well as the other student said I never made contact with her or anyone while we were doing the intervention. It got sorted out so quickly, which I was grateful for, that I wasn't put on leave or anything. I believe the student admitted to making it up a bit later as well. Not a teacher, former classmates, but almost 30 years later, in a different state and with no ties left to that school, I still remember this as if it just happened. First grade, I was 7 years old. There was this really nice kid named Steven that I should have been nicer to in my own right. He was sweet, funny. He looked a little different, paler than anyone else, but still a great kid. Then there was Dustin, who showed up later into the year. Dustin had something going on because he started off being polite, then a switch flipped, and he was a mean prick and for some reason targeted Steven. So, one day, we're all having reading time, it's quiet and chill, the switch flips, Dustin gets up, pulls Steven on the floor, sits on his stomach and wraps his hands around Steven's throat. There was no provocation, no trigger, or anything. It was just raw anger and hate, and that look in Dustin's eyes haunted me. The look on Steven's face as he's gasping to breathe makes my lungs tighten. I left that school and state the following school year, and I really hope both of them are doing alright. The kid was sitting behind a girl, and he used a lighter to set her hair on fire. It was out quickly, thankfully. Never saw that boy again. I saw this tiny kid who thought he was a gangster stab one of my other students with a pencil. The stabbed student was easily 300 pounds or more and was in a boxing program. He turned around and punched the stabber in the face so hard that 2 teeth fell out. I heard a 5-year-old in my class whisper to his friend, "Let's go and kill Mrs. ... That was me, his teacher. He's 10 now and I'm waiting to see his name in the news. His parents didn't see a problem. I'm not a teacher, but there was a student in my class that would randomly faint during class. One day he decided to randomly attack a teacher with a hockey stick, and a friend of mine had to take him by the leg so he would stop following him. That was probably scary for the teacher. He also started hitting his head against a pole on a trip. Pretty weird guy, but outside of all this he was nice. Fairly recently, I had a 15 to 16-year-old boy who was incredibly aggressive and assaultive toward girls. His ex dumped him for cheating, and pretty much every time he saw her, he'd call her a female dog, throw things at her, shove her into things, all sorts of poop to discipline her. He failed every single class, but we ultimately decided that we couldn't hold him back because he would have been a 16 to 17-year-old 9th grader, and we didn't think it was safe for him to be in class with girls who were 2 to 3 years younger than he was. I am not a teacher. However, while attending JR High, I was in class with a student who wasn't very liked by people. He was picked on so badly and I felt sad for him. I started talking to him quite often. One day we were at lunch, and he asked me to come into the hall with him. He had something to show me. We went out into the hall, and he brought a knife to school. He said because I was so nice to him, he was going to cut me up and eat me. Dead face, not joking. I started backing away from him and turned around to run to the office. Once there, I was shaking so hard and crying, nobody understood me. I was finally able to tell them what happened, but he was nowhere on campus. They never found him, and for years I never went out alone. He scared me so badly. I remember his name to this day and still try to Google him to see if I can find his name out there. As a high school English teacher, I've seen my fair share of strange and concerning behavior from students. But the scariest thing I ever witnessed was from a quiet and reserved student named Emily. One day, while grading papers during my free period, I noticed that Emily had submitted a short story for extra credit. It was well written and engaging, but as I read further, I began to feel uneasy. The story detailed the deleting of several classmates in graphic and disturbing detail. I immediately brought the story to the attention of the school's guidance counselor and principal, and they arranged for Emily to have a psychological evaluation. It turns out that she had been struggling with some deep-seated personal issues and had been using her writing as a way to cope with her feelings. It was a sobering reminder of the importance of being aware of the signs of mental distress in our students and making sure that they have access to the resources and support they need. I had a Jewish student who worshipped Hitler. He would draw on a Hitler mustache at school with a Sharpie. Once, on a dress casual day, he wore a replica of a full German war uniform he had bought online. He also carried a portable speaker and played Nazi music during lunch breaks. He was eventually suspended and given therapy. He was 12. I had a student who had a lot of issues and had basically given up on school already and had started trying to sleep in class constantly. I was a student teaching, and my supervising teacher, who was horrible, basically told me to just let him because at least he wasn't causing a distraction to the class. Then we got his 504 that told us his medical issue, and I had to check on him constantly. Of course, my supervising teacher was no help with this and was against me moving him toward the front of the class so I could have a better eye on him. He would get so angry when I would wake him up, and I almost wanted to tell him that I didn't even care that he had fallen asleep. I just needed to make sure he was responsive and okay, and that was all needed, but I also didn't want him to feel embarrassed, so instead I would just keep checking on him every 10 minutes. Had a kid who was likely a sociopathic. Other staff often labeled him as super cute, and had a great smile, but the kid was good at getting large groups to follow him, and there was always something off and kind of fake about his happy tone of voice, like it was coming from someone 10 years older. From time to time, kids who I'd known to be a follower of his would do something wrong and completely out of character, but it was always difficult proving he was actually the cause of it. One day on the playground, I noticed he kept relocating his group out of earshot of staff. When the staff moved, the group moved somewhere else. I kept close enough to be noticeable to them, and eventually the kid came up to me and said something like, "Don't you think the younger kids need more attention right now?" And I said, "Nope, I think I'm right where I need to be," to which all emotion disappeared from his face. He looked me dead in the eye and coldly said, "No, I think you need to go somewhere else right now." Then gave a large smile and went back to friends. Answering as a student. I went to a private school from 1st to 12th grade, really small. My graduating class was 20 people. Everyone knew everyone and all the teachers knew all the students. This particular teacher was known for being oblivious, and students would always get away with doing crazy things in her class. One day my friend was sitting next to me in class. Right after I finished drinking a Gatorade, he whispered to me, "I dare you to piss in the bottle right now for $20. At first I said, "Hell no, the teacher is right there." But then she left 5 minutes later and everyone in the class continued to work. I don't know how nobody noticed, but I quietly took the bottle and pissed in it under my desk. Put the lid on and slammed in on my friend's desk and said, "Where's my $20? He was in shock for a brief second, then broke out into laughter. The teacher was still gone and we started messing around. He kept throwing the bottle, full of my piss, at me. Things kept escalating and eventually he threw it at me so hard I had to dodge it. I happened to be standing right in front of the teacher's desk. It landed on her desk, broke the top off, and piss went all over her desk. Everyone was completely still for a solid 30 seconds, mouths wide open. We knew the teacher would be back any second. Struggling to figure out what to do, I grabbed another Gatorade I had and poured it all over her desk to cover the piss smell. While my friend ran to grab paper towels to hopefully clean everything up before the teacher got back. We somehow cleaned most of it up before she got back. Still smelled like piss. She never said anything and the class agreed to not speak of it. Eventually all the high school students knew, but the teachers never found out. I was another student, but I'll actually speak on behalf of the teacher because believe me, this was terrifying. We were in health class and nearing the end we were told we were given homework. This didn't sit well with one of the other students. He wasn't mentally ill, he was just one of those self-proclaimed tough guys, so no one took him seriously. After his little outburst, he was lectured by the teacher and told to sit back down. Instead, he moved the teacher's desk to the side, picked up a chair and swung it at the teacher. Now no one likes homework or the teachers, but we wouldn't go this far. He missed the first time but not the second. Got him right in the head. 3 students restrained him while a 4th went off to get help. Teacher couldn't fight back thanks to policy, but I wouldn't blame him if he did. A week later we learned the student was expelled and the teacher was on medical leave with a concussion. He was suspended for the rest of the week that remained for us. Not a teacher, but an ex-student. This happened way back in middle school, so we were pretty young and we didn't really understand the situation until much later. There was this kid in our school, he was adopted, so he had pretty intense trauma from not only adapting to a new country but also because he was abused before he was put up for adoption. Also, by the time this whole thing started, he knew the language almost perfectly and had integrated. This kid did nothing all day, He just played video games on the class computer, probably because his mother was a Karen who would get mad if anyone tried to tell his child to actually do something. The teachers didn't know what to do, so they just let him to do nothing. He was pretty calm. He sometimes did stupid things like putting down his pants in the middle of class or hitting the class rabbit, but I mean, there were worse kids, so teachers weren't really wary of him. Until one day, he just snapped. It was terrifying. He started screaming and hitting the teacher while saying insults I didn't know at the time, but I can say they were pretty harsh for a kid. The teacher, scared, called in the principal, who was this elderly super sweet woman but who knew how to put people in their place, but even her strong personality and 3 teachers worth of physical strength weren't enough to stop the kid. He was hitting and throwing things. At some point the principal got tired of the kid, so she told him to stop acting like a baby. He went absolutely ballistic. He took the rabbit from its cage and in a fit of rage he threw it out a 3-story window. Needless to say, the poor rabbit died. I will forever remember the pure terror in the principal's face at how a kid could do this and keep a straight face. He left the school. Never knew what happened to him. Probably got sent to a minor center. I would say poor kiddo, but honestly, I can't bring myself to say it. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed, please subscribe to our channel and check out our other videos. Thank you.